People shit on incels, involuntary celibates. They shit on them all the time, and it pisses me off to no end. It pisses me off to no end for the exact same reason that it pisses me off when, schoolyard bullies pick on the runt of the litter, It pisses me off because involuntary celibates are guys who are just not successful in the current deregulated sexual marketplace. It's not their fault. Just like it's not the fault of the runt of the class to be the smallest one there, it's not the fault of involuntary celibates to be at the bottom of the social, sexual hierarchy. It's not their fault. No, it's not their fault. You see, the current way we have organized mating strategies right now in our current society is that it's a free-for-all. In this free-for-all, this deregulated sexual marketplace, well, what happens is that all of the women want to be with the top 20% of the men. And the bottom 80% get essentially the leftovers. Now, the top 20 get to pick whomever they want to be with. And the middle 50, that is from the top 1% all the way to percentage number 70, roughly, they will wind up with somebody. But the bottom 20, 30%, they're not going to wind up with anyone. The fact of the matter is, most of them have spent most of their lives without any contact with a woman. And they will die, many of them, virgins. And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy, and it shows the deficiencies of our society. The fact that there is a substantial number of men, decent men, good men, men who are filled with love and compassion, men who are hardworking and want to form a family and be with a woman and be happy and make her happy and do everything in his power to make that woman happy. It's a tragedy that our society is such that we have such men who will be with no one, who will die alone. It's a tragedy. And it's not the fault of these men. I call bullshit on a lot of nonsense from leftists who say that, the problems in our society are all, social constructs and crap like that. For the most part, I think that's all nonsense, and it's just bullshit, like I said. But in this case, it really is the fault of society. It really is a social construct that leaves these men, these good men, without a mate. These good men who will go through life alone, end up alone, and this is a tragedy. In my own case, I think that I can feel compassion for these men because I don't feel, and this is going to sound monstrously arrogant, but I don't mean in an arrogant way, I don't feel that I am particularly close to that level of sexual failure. My own life and my own experience is such, and my ability to get women that I like and who are desirable is such that I never feel insecure. And see, I've noticed that, the people who feel most insecure and quote-unquote hate incels the most are usually the guys who are lower on the sexual totem pole. And this has always been the case with human beings. We're always most afraid of falling into the lower classes. See, the people who are aristocrats in anything, be it socially or be it insofar as money and be it in any quality, if you're at the top, you're not very worried about the very bottom. On the contrary, because since you're at the top, you can afford to feel compassion for the ones at the very bottom. And I think that that's what happens to me. And also, what's key is that in my own case, when I was young, I too was an involuntary celibate. Yeah, when I was young, I was a sexual failure. I was a disaster. My own nerves, my own insecurities would get the best of me. And I was a failure with women. I mean, consistently. The few times I got laid, it was just luck. Really, it was just luck. I mean, it wasn't because I was such a smooth character. No, I was not a smooth customer at all. I was a little spurg. I was just an annoying little spurg, yeah? But then over the years, because of these few initial successes, and also because I started paying attention to myself in the sense of observing myself and observing my interactions with women, I started to get better with girls. And eventually, I got to a point where I'm fairly successful with women and I don't worry about it. I'm not insecure about it. I never think that I'm going to fall into involuntary celibacy. Right? But the guys who are afraid, Those are the guys who shit on incels nonstop. And they dismiss them and they call them nasty names. And they even go so far as, the insanity of it, to say that incels are a potential terrorist group, which is fucking crazy. Incels are not a potential terrorist group. They are not. They are men who are alone. And this is actually more dangerous than a terrorist group. Because you see, a terrorist group actually believes in something. It doesn't matter what it is, and it could be incredibly stupid, but they believe in something. But incels are different. Incels are alone. They have no hope. And that's why so many of them have become violent and have done violent things, because they are alone and they feel hopeless, and they believe that they will always be alone. You see, a terrorist believes in his ideology, whatsoever that ideology may be, and he has hope that one day that ideology will reign supreme. One day, his camp will win. One day, his communist paradise will arrive on this earth, Allah will come down and everything will be wonderful in the world. You see my point. They have a vision of paradise, these terrorists. It doesn't matter if you and I think that it's ridiculous and foolish. The terrorist believes this, right? And so because of it, he acts with hope in his heart. He might do horrifying things. I am certainly not justifying any terrorist act. That's not the point I'm trying to make here. What I'm trying to say is that they believe in something and it fills them with hope. It fills them with the notion that tomorrow will be better, that they will arrive at some place beautiful, some paradise of some sort. But an incel does not have this. An incel is hopeless. An incel thinks that life in the future will be as bad as, if not worse than it is today. It's the opposite of hope. An incel believes that life is a downward spiral. It's a toilet drain. And his life is the turd in that toilet that's spinning away down to God knows where. And so out of this frustration and anger, and especially because he probably grew up thinking that he could aspire to a woman, he could aspire to a family, to children of his own, to, most important of all, the possibility of expressing the love in his heart to somebody else. Because self-love, a selfish love is a bitter, ugly kind of love. Most human beings are filled with love and they want to give it to somebody else. And an involuntary celibate has no one to give it to. And that's the thing that makes that love in his heart turn bitter. It turns bitter like wine turning into vinegar. And he wants to give this love to somebody who will reciprocate, who will receive his love and give it in return. This is at once a very modest desire, but in the contemporary culture that we're living in, it's an impossible desire. Because the way things have been organized and the priorities and incentives that we've given to both men and women, well, it incentivizes women to pursue men who might not actually be the best for them. But it encourages them to pursue men based on certain characteristics that are relatively trivial in the long run. Looks, money, social adroitness. And these involuntary celibates, they don't have these things. Maybe they're not particularly attractive, and maybe they're not particularly socially adroit. But they have other qualities that are much, much more important. Personal decency, hard work, consistency. Those are real qualities, but unfortunately the society that we're living in does not encourage girls, women to look for those qualities. No. It encourages them to look for the shiny packaging. It encourages them to look for, the 3 6s. 6 feet tall, 6-pack abs, and 6-inch dick. Which is really disgusting. But That's the world we live in. If I were talking to an incel, if I were talking to you and you are an incel, well, I would tell you that unfortunately this is the world we live in and you have to make do. You have to make do with what we have. And that would mean you have to adapt. I always encourage guys to learn game. Why do I encourage it? Well, because when I was growing up, I learned certain tricks, certain tactics, certain strategies to get women into bed. Now this is in the 80s, right? 80s, early 90s. As I was growing up, I developed a whole little panoply of little tactics and little stratagems that I would apply. And when I read about game in the 2010s, like I think it was 2011, 2012, that's when I heard about it for the first time and started paying attention to it and reading about it. And I was shocked to discover that so many of the things that I did consistently were in game. And I thought to myself, holy shit, you know, I mean, yeah, I called it one thing, you know, like I remember specifically, like in game, they call it negging, and I would call it good puppy, but it's basically the same thing, basically a gentle condescension to women to get them attracted in you. And it worked like a charm. I knew it worked like a charm because I did it for 30 odd years before I read anything about fucking game, right? And that's why I encourage guys to learn game, because game is true, and that's why I encourage incels to learn game, because it's your only hope. Yeah, because you got to work with what you got. And the current society favors men who learn game. They get girls. They get girls and they get them not only into bed, but into their lives. Yeah, and you got to learn that shit. Yeah. And you are not naturally adroit socially. You are not naturally good looking. Well, if you're not very good looking, you gotta do everything you can to improve yourself. What do girls do? Girls, you know, the not so pretty ones, the plain ones, right? They wear makeup. They take care of their hair. And with makeup and good clothes and good hair, they can turn themselves from maybe a 4 into a solid 6. You see what I'm saying? Guys, the same thing. Yeah, you got greasy face with acne, you know, your hair is like a mess and sort of greasy. Well, you go down to, you know, the expensive barber and get your hair sorted out. Buy the stupid skin creams and shit like that and use them, and go and get yourself nice clothes so that at least the packaging is more attractive. You got to work at it. Everything worthwhile in life, you got to work at it. I think that what happens with so many incels, and this is just an opinion from the outside, but thinking to myself when I was very young and I was very unsuccessful with girls, I think that the problem is that a lot of incels are kind of like repulsed by the notion of having to change themselves in order to attract women. They think that it should be a natural thing, that just by being themselves, they should get girls. Unfortunately, that's not the case. That's not the case. Because you see, no human being has psychic powers. Yeah. No human being can simply just stare at you and beam their psychic powers into your skull and start looking around your head and see what a lovely person you are on the inside. Such power does not exist. Yeah? And since such power does not exist, you have to somehow show what you have inside you by way of your packaging. And I think that this is fundamentally the thing that drives incels a little bit nuts, that they have to subordinate who they are internally and somehow try to project an attractive packaging. And especially when they feel insecure about the packaging because they don't think that they're very attractive, or they don't think that they're very good at talking to people. They feel very insecure about these things, and it drives them to feel anger, that this is what's necessary in order to succeed, in order to get companionship. But unfortunately, brother, you're going to have to do it. That's the only way. There's nothing wrong with being an incel. There's nothing wrong with it. It's an unfortunate byproduct of our current society. There's nothing wrong with being an incel, but there is something wrong with not making your best effort to break out of these shackles of involuntary celibacy. See, it's all good and fine to say, yes, I'm an incel. But that can't be the end of the sentence. It has to be, yes, I'm an incel, but I am working on it. I am working very diligently to break out of these shackles. And you know, the terrible thing that I can tell you from experience, because like I said, when I was young, I was an incel, right? The terrible thing is that, see, it's like a quantum leap, you know? You try to get good at girls. You try to attract women. You try to make them think that you're all that and more, right? And you fail. You fail consistently. You fail and you fail and you fail. And then all of a sudden, you're going to hit this like almost. And then it's going to happen again, like you're almost with the girl. And then it's going to be again and again, and all of a sudden, it'll happen. It'll click. It's like a quantum leap. Yeah, you'll go from here, and then all of a sudden, there. You're there. And you'll cease being an involuntary celibate. And it's all those tiny little things that you do to improve your situation. Your clothes, your skin, your hair. Getting good at chit-chat. Getting good at interacting verbally with women, which is so fucking important. Yeah? With men, it's not important. On the contrary, sometimes, you know, with men, you know, it works better when we don't talk that much. But with women, yeah, you gotta do that whole verbal shit. And you gotta get good at it. And that requires practice. And it's all these little things that when you add them all up, you get to that next level. But you have to do it. You have to work at it. You can't simply stew in your frustration. And I think that that's what bothers me the most about so many incels. They stew in their frustration. And I think that that's what has so many people worried about incels. They stew in their frustration. When somebody, anyone, you, me, anyone, when we just stew in our frustration and just grind on it and think about it all the time, and it just dominates our attention, we start getting obsessive. We start getting crazy. Let's face facts. We start getting seriously crazy, and we start saying things and potentially doing things that are crazy, that are very, very, very bad for anyone unlucky enough to be around a man who is stewing on something that he cannot break out of. That's why so many people are shitting on incels. It's out of fear and a sense that potentially these men who are the losers in this deregulated sexual marketplace, well, these men will one day explode. Not all of them, of course, but some of them. And some of them already have. It's fear that this explosion will happen. It's also guilt. Guilt knowing that the system that we currently have is extraordinarily unfair. It's great for the guys at the top. It's great for them. Oh yeah, they get all the pussy. I mean, they're knee-deep in pussy, right? And it's great for women too, because they don't have any sexual constraints. They can go and fuck whomever they want, like rabbits, right? And so it's great for them, and they enjoy it, sure, because, you know, both sexes enjoy sex. Yeah, if they didn't, we wouldn't have a species, for crying out loud, right? Yeah. Both sexes enjoy sex, and it's great for the vast majority of women, and it's terrific for the top 20% of men. For the 21 percentile to the 70 percentile, more or less, it's a goddamn struggle. And for the bottom 30%, there's no hope. And I think it's guilt that makes so many people afraid of that bottom 30% of the incels. Maybe you're an incel. Everybody's afraid of you because they fear that you're going to explode, because they fundamentally realize how unfair this situation really is. So you're an incel, right? So what do? Very simple. Like I said before, you have to improve yourself. All the little things to get better. And you're an incel, well, you're not going to have the luxury of choice. A lot of guys who are higher up on the sexual totem pole are going to have the luxury of choice. You have to realize that you are not going to have that luxury. Yet at the same time, you don't want to attach yourself to a disaster of a woman, right? So you have to think to yourself in the following manner. You have to say to yourself, I am an incel. I'm going to do everything possible to get a woman. I'm going to fix myself up, fix my superficial aspects, fix my language and be able to talk to women to convince them to be with me. But yet at the same time, I will make a pact with myself that I will not shortchange myself. If I pair up with a woman, it's going to be with a woman who maybe she's not the prettiest. She's not the most attractive. Maybe she's a little bit fat and plain. I'll attach myself to her. But I'm going to be intransigent insofar as some key limits, some key issues. And most important of all, she has to be stable and decent. And that's what you have to do. That's how you have to think. You have to think to yourself that you're going to have very few opportunities. I wish I could be like more hopeful. But if you're an incel, you know, it's going to be a long goddamn struggle. Simple as that. It's going to be a very, very tough struggle, and I'll tell you something that most people are not going to tell you, which is the odds against you are very high. If you're an incel, if you're a man who's 25, 30, and you have never been with someone, let alone if you're 35, 40, the odds are stacked against you. You're going to have to work extremely hard. But more likely than not, you're a very, very smart guy. Most incels I've seen are very smart. The dumb ones can fall into pussy relatively easily. It's the smart ones who overthink it and they fuck themselves up. Well, since you're a smart guy, use that intelligence to your advantage. Recognize what I'm telling you. Don't allow yourself to stew in your anger and frustration. It serves no purpose. If you're frustrated and angry and upset about the situation, then you have to find a way to express that anger in a harmless way. Devote yourself to some hobby, some pastime, some sport, whatever. But don't allow yourself to stew in your anger because it will hurt no one but yourself. At the same time, you have to realize that the odds are against you, and it's grossly unfair. But unfortunately, life has never been fair. The unfairness of life, it's like musical chairs, okay? It's like a spinning wheel, yeah? It's unfair to different people in different generations. And in this generation that we're living in this time period that we're living in, you who are not that attractive, not that socially adroit, you're the one who's going to lose out. And maybe in the next cycle, in the next century or millennia, guys like you will be the winners. Who knows? But that's a pipe dream. You have to work with what you got. God, this is a downer video, and I'm sorry, but I hope this helps.